Hello and welcome to WJTS-Inform, as we are now in part 2 as we speak with State Senator Mark Messmer about this year's legislation, which ended a week ago. Last week we talked about the budget. This week we're going to talk about some other bills. But Mark, there was a bill, or part of the budget that we didn't talk about, but I'd like you to bring up, and that's the HIP 2.0.
Yep, starting probably about 10 years ago, Indiana started an insurance program for low-income families called the Healthy Indiana Plan.
Okay.
And it was paid for out of, I think, tobacco settlement dollars. That's kind of how we were funding it. And it was a great program. People that were in it, really liked it. And then back in 2010 with the Affordable Care Act, they part of that program said everybody had to expand their Medicaid programs to pull in, more. I mean, not just low-income families, but up to 2.5 times, the poverty line to bring additional folks into Medicaid eligibility. But the Supreme Court, when they ruled on the Affordable Care Act, said states don't have to do that because the government is not paying fully for that program. So about 15 states expanded their Medicaid and about 35 didn't. Indiana was one of the states that didn't immediately expand their Medicaid enrollment because the short term, the federal government was going to pay for it fully for 2 years, and then they were going to drop down to paying 90%. Well, that 90% that 10% that the state had to pick up was about $200 to $400 million per year. Okay. And there's no way we could have done that without a tax increase. I mean, our budgets don't have $400 million of cushion. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that was based on their projections of about 300,000 additional Hoosiers enrolling into Medicaid. My looking at the uninsured numbers, that number probably would have been more like 500,000 to 600,000, just because of the numbers of uninsured Hoosiers that we have, and down the road as businesses are either mandated to pay higher and higher premiums or stop insurance. I think down the road the trend is going to be, for a lot of people who are currently able or trying to pay, and if they're under 50 employees, they're not mandated to provide insurance to the employees. Over time, you're going to end up seeing businesses drop out of the the insurance program for their employees, which would have inflated those those Medicaid enrollment numbers. So in an effort to make it a program that we could afford to do, we petitioned the federal government for about 2 to 3 years to allow us to take the basic Healthy Indiana Plan structure, which had minimal co-pays, deductibles for the people that were in the Healthy Indiana Plan. I mean, it was a low-cost program, but required doctor co-pays, prescription co-pays, and deductibles. And we pushed and pushed, the federal government to allow that to happen before we expanded, our Medicaid program to the Affordable Care Act rules. And in February, they agreed. They announced an agreement to accept that, that Medicaid expansion to include co-pays and deductibles. And we were with that, and then the hospitals agreed. Part of that HIP 2.0 that we had the original Healthy Indiana Plan, we called this version Healthy Indiana Plan 2.0. There was an assessment tax that the hospitals agreed to pay, with the co-pays, deductibles, and the hospital assessment. That fully funds the state's portion of the Medicaid expansion, so we don't have to increase taxes, and down the road we can fully fund the Medicaid expansion without costing the taxpayers a bunch of money. So that got approved by the federal government in February. We needed to implement that funding mechanism in this year's budget, and that was part of the budget item that we skipped last week. But we'll allow additional, about another 600,000 Hoosiers to get Medicaid enrollment that matches the way we had the original Healthy Indiana Plan set up. And I think it's a model you're going to see those other states that didn't expand their Medicaid years ago, follow that plan and implement that that model across the country.
So Indiana's going to be leading again.
That's right.
Okay. Now, some other bills that probably the Senate Bill 1, The RFRA bill, some of those are,
I think the RFRA bill ended up being a lot of miscommunication
much to
of
do
what
about
it did.
nothing,
It
maybe?
was.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, our RFRA bill really didn't vary any different than the 31 other states and the federal government RFRA bill, but we got caught on the back end of a major media blitz that the opponents had tended to use, just to promote the homosexual agenda, which, the timing of with the Final Four, with the passage of the bill, I mean, it was a well orchestrated media blitz that they conducted. We clarified the following week after signing RFRA that some of the opponents said that bill could be used to discriminate. We knew it couldn't from 22 years of court history and just the basic structure of the bill. So we passed a clarifying bill the following week that said, no, you can't use this to discriminate. It's meant to prohibit discrimination, not allow discrimination. So we did a clarifying bill the following week, and then some of the folks on the religious organizations were upset that they thought we gutted the bill. Well, the bill didn't do what you thought it did. It didn't do what they thought it did. It'll work. But it was an interesting couple-week process.
I think it might be one of those things. Time will tell. We'll see what happens there. And Senate Bill 1, which, when it originally started, you thought it was a good bill, and then it got changed, and you didn't vote for it the second time.
Right.
So explain that.
As Senate Bill 1 started, and the only thing that I could have seen that I thought we probably could have improved it from the beginning was to. But we had a lot of restructuring of the governance of the state school board. We took the governor's appointment authority from 10 members down to 4, and we gave the legislative body, the House and Senate, 4 appointments. Dropped the total number of members down to 9. The superintendent being 1, House and Senate getting 4, the governor getting 4, because the General Assembly, by constitutional authority, is the school policy governing entity, not the governor, not the superintendent. The legislature has constitutional authority for school policy. We created the superintendent to help implement it. We created the state school board to help once we pass a law governing setting policy, we created the school board to help develop the rules of how to how the superintendent would then implement it. We thought we needed to play a more important role just based on some of the breakdown of that function of the school board and the superintendent's office. We thought the legislature needed more control of that. When the House got the bill, they took the appointments back to 8 by the governor and 2 by the legislature, and took away all the governance changes. We had posting of minutes of agendas 2 weeks prior, and letting school board members have input on the agenda, requiring majority vote of the school board before they could adjourn. Everything got taken out except the changing the appointments back to more closely what they were before. And I mean, part of the problem is I think part of the bickering between the superintendent and the governor is probably some of it's the governor's fault and some of it's the superintendent's fault. But we really, that bill went back and basically gave the governor, control of that board again. And
well, with eight members,
8 of the 8 of the 11 and 8 of the 10 appointments, and it changed. Then it will allow the school board to elect their chairman, starting in 2017. If we could have kept our original bill and just put that 2017 date till after the next election, it would have been a change that would have had some impact on being able to to impact how that board is working together. I mean, I don't expect to see much change of how things are occurring. I mean, that the appointment changes kick in July 1 this year, so there will be a new school board after that point. But I don't expect. I mean, if 10 members are on there now, odds are the 10 members that aren't now will be the 10 members that are on it when it's done. I mean, we might be able to get, if the House and Senate each get one person, there's a possibility, we'd get 2 different people than what the governor has on there now. But So I don't expect.
So when it
there to
came
be-
back the second time around, you said, I don't like it.
It's not really going to gain anything.
Yeah.
It's not worth the controversy. That's not really going to accomplish anything.
Sounds like you feel it doesn't have that equal balance it
It
would have
doesn't.
had
Correct.
with legislation having a little more control.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
But it's still passed.
it passed.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
not everything you want is going to go your way, right?
No,
Okay.
it doesn't.
All right. What about the annexation of where cities are annexing areas? That was a lot of discussion.
There was quite a bit of discussion, and if there's what the bill ended up with, if a city or town has an area that they need to annex for an economic development project, as the bill passed, it'll allow that to happen. If folks can still remonstrate in those scenarios and make sure that the city has a true economic development need, and so they could so we did set up some. If 65% of the folks that are going to get taken in, sign a remonstrance petition, if it's an economic development issue, those decisions still go to court to be decided.
Okay. But only if it's an economic.
Only if it's and they have to have an economic development plan filed with the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, planned and approved.
Okay.
That here's what we want to bring in for economic development needs and why. And if it's approved, now you can still try to remonstrate that and take it to court. And there may be areas that are deemed not part of that economic development zone. But some good provisions that were brought in through Senate Bill 330. In an area that gets annexed, if it's ag property, a city or town cannot raise the assessed value, cannot raise the taxes collected on agricultural property that's even brought in through an annexation, which was a concern and a problem in other areas. And if it's not an economic development project, if the remonstrance petition hits 65%, then if they're just saying, well, we want that subdivision over there because we want more area in our tax base. Mm-hmm. If the people don't want it, it still takes, instead of being a 51% as the bill started, it's now 65%. But if they sign in remonstrance petitions that say we don't want to be brought in, and they get the 65% number, it stops.
Okay. And the city can't take it.
Can't take it.
Okay.
So and it requires the city to explain, why they need it. It requires some outreach activity by the city. We want to bring an area in. Here's why. Here's what you're going to get out of it. Here's why your extra taxes will be worth it. So it requires them to sell the project, and it requires and part of the problem with the prior annexation laws. Once a city, if you were a property owner and you signed a waiver to not fight, if you signed a remonstrance waiver at any point in the ownership of that property, it stayed on the books forever. This Senate Bill 330, a waiver is good for 15 years.
Okay.
From when you sign it, it stays in place, but not in perpetuity. So
you can change your mind.
You can, or what happens a lot of times is, I may have built a house in an area. They either brought water or sewer to an area. A lot of times they'll require you to sign a waiver, that you won't fight a remonstrance to get it. Mm-hmm. But I did that maybe 15, 20, 25 years ago. Somebody else buys my house now. You don't even know there's a waiver on the property. Also required is when there's a property change of hands. The city has to inform a property owner that there is a waiver that's been signed at some point and when that waiver expires. So we put a deadline on how long those waivers are good. They can't just last forever.
Okay.
So trying to level the playing field between property owners and city government. And that ended up a pretty good balanced bill. One that passed earlier was Senate Bill 309, that when there is an annexation, if the rural electrics own that area, or they have that service area, they can't just be, those service areas can't just be taken without equal negotiating authority, during that exchange process. Just, an issue of fairness as well. That really, same problem, that was occurring across the state, but just, it was limited to the electric utilities. So that was a good bill. Another good bill that finally got passage was House Bill 1540. It was the casino legislation, affected French Licks. All the river boats, now have the authority if within their existing footprint, if their boat has met its life cycle, and it'll allow them to move onto the property basically in the same footprint area where they are now. They can't open a new site somewhere else, but within their footprint, it'll allow them to bring their casino to the land-based casino. 25 years ago, riverboats were the way all states were doing it, and over time, most states have there's just a lot of problems with trying to do riverboats. I mean, we had areas where the riverboats couldn't turn around without getting into Kentucky waterways,
right.
And so Kentucky said, "You want to turn around in our water? You're going to give us a cut." Well, they decided those ended up getting parked, and then when river levels are high or river levels are low, they couldn't undock anyway. Cost a lot of money just to maintain the maritime licensing and all the regulations that go with having a boat that's docked.
There is not a boat that I'm aware of that even goes out.
Not anymore.
I mean, I don't even remember really at the beginning many that, I think they turned their motors on, but I don't know if they really went anywhere.
Yeah. So, that's probably the most significant change. A lot of good tax changes that we did along with that. We raised, what they call the free play promotional coupons that they're allowed to send out to pay prior folks to get them to come to the from $5 million per year to $7 million per year. If you're a small casino and you don't use that much, it allows them to sell those free play coupons to other casinos. So some of the small operators that maybe never use the $5 million anyway, they can sell that extra $2 million to the bigger casinos who could probably use more.
Okay.
So it'll help the little guys. It'll help the racinos in Anderson and Shelbyville. We lowered their tax rate, a couple percent, which they were, wanting, because they had a pretty high rate on their taxation. In 5 years, they'll be allowed to have live dealers at the two racinos in Anderson and Shelbyville. They wanted it now. The House bill when it started had limited live dealers. They have all electronic, whether it's a blackjack table or slot machine. They have slot machines, but they have games where you normally would have, blackjack or poker or roulette. I mean, they have electronic versions of that now, and after 2021, they'll be able to start implementing some live dealers in those spots. The governor had threatened to veto the whole bill if they had any live dealers in it. So as a compromise, I said, okay, let's just get it in place and know that in 2021 we're going to be able to petition the Gaming Commission to go ahead and allow that that process to start. So French Lick got some reductions in their tax rates and allowing some extra dollars to go in their historic preservation fund. Just some good. They were able to not have to charge an entry fee. The people that come into the casinos never had to pay it.
But it was being paid.
But it was being collected by the casino and then sent. And part of that went to local funding. But there were some offset tax changes to allow them to do that, through their normal casino revenues rather than charging the $3 per person. And if you have the ability to go out to eat, go to the casino, go to a show, go to the casino, each time that person came and went was another $3. So, that ended up being a little bit prohibitive for the casinos. Didn't really seem to be a tax policy that made sense. So they just changed the structure of how those. I mean, they're going to still try to get most of those same dollars to the locals, just recapturing it. Some through food and beverage tax, some through the racinos of getting their eventual live dealers. They're having to offset some of the, some of that tax revenue to French Lick to allow that to happen. So all in all, and then a study committee on some of the other, the overall tax structure of where the tax rates are for all the casinos. We'll go to a study committee to help if we need to come back next year and fine tune it again one more time. But I think everybody got a little something that they wanted, and really help our Indiana casinos be more competitive with Ohio and Michigan and Illinois, and probably eventually Kentucky. I mean, the environment for that has changed quite a bit in the last 25 years. We used to be the only one. Now everybody's got them, and you just have to try to help them be more competitive.
And we're going to keep that money coming into the state.
Right.
That's good. All right.
Yep.
Anything else that
a couple other good bills. Senate Bill 436 is a freeze on the ag property tax rates, which was projected to be some pretty stiff increases over the next 5 years. We're going to freeze the rates where they are this year, and have Purdue go back and reformulate how that ag assessing formula is done. Just really start the formula from scratch. Try to make it more reflective of the current commodity prices. So I mean, make it track closer to if prices are up and expenses are up, or I mean, make the fluctuation to be more. Right now, it's got about a 4-year lag, and so the high farm prices from 3 and 4 years ago, as the prices have dropped, the current program with how they calculate it is going to keep going up for about another 3 or 4 years based on the old historic prices. So that's pretty significant. Senate Bill 441 was an overall tax overhaul bill, simplification of some taxes, but I was able to get an amendment in that bill that helped the logging industry. Department of Revenue about a year ago decided that tree harvesting was no longer an agricultural process.
They wanted more money, probably.
They wanted more money.
Yeah. Okay.
So I talked to the head of the Department of Agriculture, and I said, did you know the Department of Revenue decided that timber harvesting is no longer agricultural? And he was surprised to know, that changed. So we were able to clarify that indeed timber harvesting, falls under the ag definitions, and took care of that. That was a bill that I had filed, but Senator Hirschman just put it in as part of that overall bill. And House Bill 1318 pulled in another Department of Natural Resources, was starting, if you had highway right-of-way that fell under an area where there were some DNR state forest areas, which you'd be surprised, you could be driving down the road and a little patch of woods over there on your right is a DNR area, and as you were driving through that highway right-of-way, folks like Perry Spencer Communications, who want to expand broadband out into rural areas, were having to pay tens of thousands of dollars of right-of-way fees to go through that highway right-of-way. Well, we asked the DNR to stop doing that, and they said, until you change the law, we're going to. So we
changed the law. Okay. Well, I know what you're talking about, because the Ferdinand State Forest, I think people think of is the Ferdinand State Forest, where you go.
You'd be
but
surprised.
It's a whole bunch of little patches of forest.
It is.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, and that's exactly the Ferdinand State Forest down near St. Mindred, down near St. Croix. I mean, there's places that are. You just drove through the Ferdinand State Forest. Yeah. Did you know it? You would have no idea.
No, most people think it's, and really, I guess, I never realized, this is aside from what we're talking about, but there's state forests, there's recreation areas, there's state parks. They're all different and have different purposes. So, okay.
But as we're trying to get broadband expanded out into rural territories, that $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000.
That's prohibitive.
It's very prohibitive, and it's really counterproductive. So we increased DNR. One of the budget items we did talk about last week was we increased their budget by about $4 million a year. We said, we said we're going to fix this utility right-of-way thing for you. We'll get you more money, but you're going to have to quit doing such silly things.
So they did.
We did. Yeah.
Well, I know a lot more, but we really do appreciate you coming in and talking with us, and every week throughout the legislation to come in and speak with us. We really appreciate you taking.
Well, happy to. I really enjoy it. Okay, thank you, Bill.
Our guest has been and has been for many Fridays here in January, February, March, and April, and May. Has been State Senator Mark Messmer. We really appreciate you coming in, and we thank you for watching WJTS Inform. We're local people watching local people.